What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Shift Tab. I'm Cory, your host, and today we are joined by Matt Beane. So Matt is an associate professor of technology management at UC Santa Barbara. He's also the author of a book called The Skill Code, and he's founder and CEO of a company called SkillBench. And he has spent a ton of time, let's say bulk of his life work, in researching on how people build skill and work involving AI and robotics. So today we're going to be talking about a number of different things, but really the burning question is that as intelligent tools, a la like AI, help us move faster, are we still designing work in a way that helps people become more capable, right? Are we not losing skill as we start to offload things onto these intelligent machines? So with that, very happy to have Matt on. All right, and today we've got Matt. Matt, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Really glad to be here.
Yeah, we've got some good topics to talk through because I've made it through not the whole book, but I've made it through the majority of it. And I'm just getting to the parts that are interesting where I have a lot of questions. So I think that today is aptly timed. But yeah, so before we get into it, would love for, a little bit of background on you, how you got here, some of the amazing work that you're doing at SkillBench, as well as a lot of the other research areas that you have. And then we'll kind of dive into some of the topics.
Sounds great. This is kind of fun. We've been working together for a while in different ways, and now we get to turn this into a podcast, which is it's never happened this way.
It's never happened before now. So going through a lot of your work that you're doing at SkillBench, as well as I think over a decade of research that you've been doing now on how skills mature, how individuals actually obtain skills, how they're transferred in the workplace. I think all of that is so aptly timed right now because, with the introduction of these kind of thinking machines, a lot of skills, that whole kind of human characteristic framework things start to happen. And, you modeled it well, right? Is that, skill is built through kind of the 3 C's. So between challenge, complexity, and connection. And, maybe in the realm of software development, AI is fundamentally disrupting, how skills might mature, how they might kind of pass down. But in that lens, what are you seeing, and what are some of the kind of key insights that you're starting to pick up that are happening?
Right. Yeah. So, and for folks who haven't read the book, and maybe this will kick you off to go read it, this challenge, complexity, connection thing's worth a little bit of an unpack. I started my own research in 2011. So however long that is, implementation of various intelligent technologies in skilled work. And to write it all up as a book, I basically had to figure out the core finding in some of my early research was, wow, this stuff is really bad for skill development for junior people in particular. And the basic reason is the senior person can do a lot more without that junior person in the loop. That's what automation is, basically. It takes the scut work part of the job and just routinizes it. So in the case of robotic surgery, you had people who could now do a whole procedure themselves rather than needing 4 hands, just to be real concrete about it. And that meant that junior person would come to a procedure for 4.5 hours and fold their arms and watch a movie. So, and yet legally empowered to use that tool after they left their residency because now they're trained. So in software development, I got acquainted about 2 years ago now, starting to do research in this domain. And after I got going, a guy named Steve Yegi, who's now a friend, wrote a piece called The Death of the Junior Developer. And he, which I highly recommend to folks, and he was speculating. He's like, I don't have data, folks, but I am actually kind of worried about if I'm a junior dev, how I get sort of pair coding time with somebody who's more senior working on something, just sort of through collateral contact, working on a hard problem, learning about how to do this thing, developing taste, the hard stuff about being a good steward of high quality software. And so I introduced myself to him and we sort of hit it off. Coarsely, that is what we should expect. If you just take one message away from the book, is that we need challenge to learn and grow. That's the first C. We need complexity, which is not just engaging with the focal thing you're working on, like TypeScript for high-speed infra, but the universe in which that task sits so you can understand the system that you're playing in. And then the third part is a bond of trust and respect between human beings. connection. And we need that for the motivation to learn. Like, if you're my boss and I want to get better, part of the reason is because I want you to think better of me. Like, I want to earn your trust and respect. And it goes both ways, from expert to junior. So if I'm not involved in the work anymore, all three of those things take a hit. Like, I don't get the challenge I need. I don't get broader exposure. I'm left being like a script monkey or something really small. And also then I don't get many cycles with you. And so I'm going to struggle. Default AI use, Anthropic's own report on how they use AI inside Anthropic and the consequences of that for how they treat each other and work is completely and directly revealing of that. Number 4 is an item in that report says, people don't come to each other anymore, and that is sad. and like, I can work alone now, and junior people don't come to me so much, and that's kind of a bummer. It's like, no, how about the way you're using this tool disenfranchises that junior person? Mm-hmm. And by the way, that junior person knows stuff these days that you don't know. They can manage 50 agents and you can't, and you'll never learn that fact unless you get them in the loop. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's the sort of short story. I think software has sort of gone first with AI in a very obvious and big way. And so these effects are going to be more evident to that community, and new options are going to become more evident to that community before other occupational communities. Mm-hmm. But it's coming for the whole world of work for sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that, right, too, is because, I think that a lot of times individuals or organizations might look at the expert novice relationship and think that the flow of skills only goes down, right? It's only the expert providing skills and mentorship down. But to your point, like, a lot of things come up as well, right? You bring new individuals in the workforce, they have different diverse backgrounds. They've got, they probably grew up more tech native than some of the, their older mentors, right? So that flow of skills goes in both directions. And with this idea of being able to stick AI in there, you are starting to break this, which, we saw it the other day. I thought it was super interesting, right? Like, one of our senior engineers was asking about, dealing with a PR request and, like, why does he need to review code and leave comments rather than just, like, hit the AI button and have it fix the problem rather than provide feedback. And, a line from your book that I love so much is, you say here, I'm quoting, is that, imagine how much worse it can get when we insert technology into the work that both separates that expert from a novice and gives that novice a steady stream of hyper-convincing literal snapshots of the situation they think they're dealing with. Another cupful of techno gas on the skills bonfire. I thought that was such a great line, right? And that, one, they're not really getting all the way there. Is there some mitigation, right? Are people, anyone doing it right now that you've seen with industry-wide adoption?
Right. So I have multiple hats that I wear in this life. One of them is as a researcher, professor at UC Santa Barbara, study all of this stuff and so on. And the other is CEO of SkillBench. I mean, you teed up SkillBench to begin with. So if I put on the researcher hat, no is the answer.
Yeah.
Right. So what you see are approaches that are in organizations around deploying and using AI that are focused on extracting productivity gains. For individuals and firms, the question is, how do I get more token efficient doing this thing? Mm-hmm. Right. And that's about just optimizing cost versus some sort of outcome. Even that is not all that sophisticated right now. I mean, really, there's sort of big open questions about how to do that. But that doesn't get at what, if I'm going to be kidding around, call token efficiency. In other words, how much better are you getting at being token efficient per unit time as a company, as a function, and as a person? The first derivative of your performance, to be super nerdy. But practically, what does that mean? That means learning, skill development. And if you're not getting better at doing the thing over time, you are probably going to get worse. That's the conclusion from the research, right? And this does not just affect junior people. So anyway, that's the long way to say is I talk to, say, 4 to 6 organizations a week these days at the executive level, through SkillBench, a lot of it, but also through like Ethan Malik is a friend. He and I wrote our books at the same time. He wrote a book called co-intelligence. He's got another one coming up. So I'm connected through him to lots of orgs and so on. And it's still kind of early days in that sense. And I don't see good systematic responses. I have a lot of inbound. I have a lot of execs who like want to talk to me about this. And every single time I talk to anybody about like, what's all this AI use doing to the skills of your people and your organizational fitness tomorrow rather than today? And they go, oh crap, that's a good one. That's an issue. Then they want more talking about it, but no automated solution. Like just giving people training, setting up mentorships and so on. This is all like good planning for 2022. But we're sitting on an exponential cost performance curve for these models. It's the clock speed is wrong.
Right.
That's not going to work. So anyway, there's my academic researcher sort of doing my best to pay attention to zeitgeist answer. Chapter 9, I think it is in this book. I can't believe I don't know the number. The last chapter in this book paints a vision for how AI could become deeply fundamental for how capability gets built in this world. In fact, strictly required for the clock speed of our adaptability as a system to keep up with the IQ that's getting shipped every week. And for that to work, the capability itself has to be integral to a new way of learning, a new way of accelerating. And in fact, you folks inside Andela have a first insider's peek at this actually functioning in a prototype sense in an engineering team. And I don't want to talk about in too much detail about how that works, but the purpose of SkillBench is to create the reality that is envisioned in that chapter 9 of that book, a world where we can learn way faster, way better, and that includes better human relationships, more exposure to complexity, and healthier challenge because we're using AI, not in spite of it. And so it's like in economist terms, you have to, the negative externality of using AI these days is skill development takes a hit. Right. Sacrifice that on the altar of productivity. SkillBench is built on the thesis that you can have your cake and eat it too. In fact, we have to, we must in order to keep adapting fast enough. So from that point of view, I'm looking at a system that is part of the solution, where the worker gets incredible value. They can help each other out on that front, and the firm can adapt and grow in a way that is not Big Brother. That's the critical thing. But we need lots of roses to bloom to meet that need.
Yeah, you mentioned it there, but I think it's important to call out about like the clock speed and organizations wanting to see, the ROI of AI and all of these promises that have been painted in the marketing sphere of what this thing can do. And so, I think you outline it good in the book too. It's that, if you can give this tech to an expert that lets them become much faster and less dependent on others, then you kind of put them in the box and let them go sit over here and work. But you're doing this at like a long-term detriment to like the future workforce. And so, you gave this example of shadowing, the incoming residents when they're trying to learn, new robotics ways to do surgery. And one of them had a really, really tough time, but then there was another candidate that actually performed very well. And I think as you dug, you found out that there's this concept of like shadow learning or people finding alternate routes to get that info. And so, maybe for people listening or watching, if you are someone that's maybe at the novice or junior level and you're trying to understand like, what are these shadow routes? Like, what does that mean? Like, how would you explain that to them?
Yeah. So I designed all my studies to try to find the sort of positive needle in the negative haystack of all of this. And in the case of robotic surgery, this is the first place I found this shadow learning business, which is, if you were sort of trying to learn the way you are supposed to, you show up in the OR, you expect to put your hands to business and get struggling and, you're buddying up with an expert. Then you'd fail. Because you're not needed. You're strictly optional anymore. And when is the right time to involve somebody who's slower and will make more mistakes in a surgery? How about never? That's the default condition. The people who got ahead built skill through entirely non-traditional means that in fact were rule bending and breaking. Like no one would think they're appropriate or okay. So for instance, operating on patients when the senior surgeon was not in the room. That's not something you want to turn into policy or training material, right?
Yeah,
But it's what you needed to do in order to dodge the system to get the reps so that you could get good.
Right.
Or they would go to YouTube, find recorded videos of a surgery, and a normal resident would watch that, say once, say a 3-4 hour video. A really good shadow learner would watch that video 100 times. 300 hours of review on the same vid. And they're doing very different things at time, 92 than they were at time 4, like almost Madden chalking, style football annotation kind of thing. But nobody thought that was appropriate. I have quotes of senior surgeons saying, you don't learn to be an actor by watching movies. It's like, well, guess what, kid?
Yeah.
You do now.
You do, yeah.
So, what you don't do is copy those people. Finding them is really hard because everybody kind of intuitively knows that I'm getting good, but I shouldn't be doing this. So, but if you do happen to find, you can ask around, especially if you're a learner or a novice, there's somebody in your pool. Like 1 in 8 and 1 in 10 is about the number I found. And that's at top tier surgical institutions. But that's sort of borne out across multiple occupations. They're around. Find them. You're really good. How'd you do that? Right? It's not, and senior leaders should be doing this too, by the way. How'd you do that? The answer, you shouldn't be like, okay, I'll copy that now, because you risk getting fired. I mean, or at least censured. The question is, what is that person fighting to preserve? What are the working conditions that they are fighting to preserve? By the way, I've saved you some time on that. First third of the book, challenge, complexity, connection. That's the universal code they're all fighting for. That's where that came from. Yeah. I looked at shadow learners across over 30 occupations, technologies, contexts. Universally, those people are doing stuff to protect, challenge, complexity, and connection. So that's a leg up, but still, for your local context, the details matter. So you got to go and figure that stuff out. Again, not to copy, but just try to figure out, like, what's the scalable thing here? Or what could I build that would enable that?
Right. Yeah, I think what's interesting about that, right, is that so while, AI is like, I think that coding and programming is the first to get the major kind of shot across the bow, right? Is that it's also I think the benefit of it potentially developers or upcoming developers might have is that software development, I think, has always been a much more like safe ground for shadow learning, right? It's much more safer to shadow learn as a programmer than it is as a surgeon, whether that's trying to, hack together a game or code on your free time or do this or do that. It is a good environment. I think that I would even argue that a lot of the great programmers kind of pushed up through these kind of, I'll figure it out. I don't need to, traditional like learning tracks to get there, and that fight for it. And so do you think that as this skills gap, experts being put into I don't want to say put into a box, but becoming more isolated because of these tools, is the ownership now becoming more on the novices and junior developers, the ones that are willing to take the stab and the push to say, I'm going to go bug my senior principal engineer and like get things out of them? Yeah,
I think I'll give you 2 answers on this. One would be a great idea in like 2023, 2024. And I still think it's a good one. I've seen it across numerous organizations. So I'll give that to you. And the other is to say, none of that's good enough anymore. And chapter 9 kind of thoughts. So on the sort of how to refactor things so that everybody learns and is more productive together, one tactic I've seen across a number of companies now of very different kinds is you have one senior SWE who sits above or around, say, 4 to 6 junior devs, really green folks who are willing to let it rip and just spray tokens all over everything and try to get results. That senior person says to them, okay, right. Unreasonable goal, unreasonable timeline, go. You have 3 days to build an entire back end for this new product. And the junior person's like, I've never done any of that. What? And they're like, now you have 2 days and 23 hours and 59 minutes. Go. And then at the end of that time, they show up having they're sweating, having done something. They were like, I'm not qualified. And the senior person says, right, now you have a half day to go back through what you've done and find quality problems.
Oh, interesting.
And then they do, and they come back, and the senior person says, right, good for you, got 6. there are 2 more. You have 2 hours. Go find the rest. Then they come back. And then that senior person does a detailed blow-by-blow review of all of the issues that person found. And then they say, oh, and by the way, you missed the key one, which is that this shouldn't have been built in the first place. It's a stupid idea. Right? Like whatever that junior person missed, that senior person plays cleanup on, and then they pair code the crap out of it and get it done. Mm-hmm. And that senior person does that across, say, 4 to 6 devs. That group is radically more productive than they would have been before because they eat a huge problem really fast. The senior person is doing lots of Socratic questioning. Like, no, I'm not going to tell you what I see. You need to go look like 2 or 3 times. And the junior people are learning like crazy.
Interesting.
They're sweating. And so at the end of it, you win productivity wise and you win skill development wise, like huge win in both categories. The only other category I found that natively in all my studies was bomb disposal, interestingly enough, like dealing with IEDs. The moment that we went to robots, junior people learned a lot faster and it was a lot safer and a lot more throughput because instead of the senior person walking up to an IED and poking it with a stick and the junior person in a bomb-proof truck 300 meters away, they're both in the bomb-proof truck and the junior person has an Xbox controller in their hand. They're the meat servo and the senior person's like, do this. This is what I'm seeing. Here's what's going on. The rich exchange between them just was like orders of magnitude better. The junior person soaking it all up. Time to competence was a lot shorter. So this feels like that in software. Anyway, stuff like that is being invented out there right now. Right. And that works. Like independently, orgs have been discovering that technique. So that's part 1. Part 2, all of this has to be aggressively enabled by AI itself. What I just described, that sort of scaffold where the senior person skates across 4 to 5 people, give them an unreasonable goal, Socratic dialogue all the way up. You could build that into a harness.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I was going to ask what you meant by enabled by AI itself, but okay.
Yeah, like you shouldn't rely on a manager who's super motivated, has the skill to refrain from sharing what they see. You have to have somebody who's just kind of really into that game of being like, 20 questions, go, and nope, try again. That has to be really dopamine enhancing for that person. It takes a special person with really weird skills. Most senior SWEs or many, that's just not their thing. But if you built software that was AI enabled that nudged a group towards that kind of behavior, many more would be into it, I think. So that's why we need to build systems that sort of help us reconstitute the way that we work together so that we get more productivity and more skill development by default, not because anybody's special.
Right. Yeah, that the bomb disposal one is fascinating. I mean, I never would have thought of that, but it makes total sense. And it kind of brings me back. So I was talking to a friend of mine named John Windsor about kind of, and he's more focused on like open talent and like the future of work, but he gave this really interesting analogy that, he remembers when, like when typists kind of phased out because, you needed typists because they were experts and the cost of a mistake was really high if you were trying to type up a legal document or a formal filing. And then when, the word processor came online and the cost, the mistake went down, that job and role kind of phased out and changed. And so it seems like that potentially there's a parallel here where like having AI maybe in the field of software development can reduce the cost of making a mistake. So if you give a team of junior developers and say, hey, you've got 2 or 3 days to go build a bunch of stuff, even if it's all throwaway, they can cover a lot of ground for relatively low cost, but with a high return of exposure, of challenge, of complexity, of connection with the senior.
Yeah, and the whole mental model, cultural model, call it what you want to, tactical, practical model, tooling model is radically shifted because now you're dealing with a word processor and a digital screen instead of expensive ink, mechanically failure-prone typewriter, and like that typewriter cost $3,000 in today's dollars. And the ink has to be shipped from wherever. Like you're exactly right. Cost of failure going close to zero instantly changes the possibility space. Anyway, it just takes folks a while to figure like, wait. If Steve Yagi says code's now like a high pressure fire hose, It's a liquid you spray on stuff. If you're doing it by hand and working with it as if it's a solid, you are in trouble. The main thing is spray it at a target, then interrogate what happened. You got to do that. So, and he said the same thing about moving from assembly up to C++ or whatever. Right. In the beginning, it was like, that stuff sucks and I'd rather do my, do assembly by hand. And it was true for a period of time.
Right.
But now, nobody compiles their code manual. We just take it for granted that that's bomb-proof reliable. And anyway, I just think that kind of mentality, which is to assume, all right, what if we assume failure goes to close to zero on this class of tasks, and the cost of getting A+ output on that task goes to close to zero over time in a reasonable time, say a year from now? What does that mean? That means higher level of abstraction, questions of taste and judgment and coordination matter a lot more, like saying no to anything less than an A+ idea. That becomes even more important, like new stuff. But then how do we work together if all of a sudden everything can be throwaway?
All right.
This is never going to be true in surgery, probably. There are some kinds of work, like you're exactly right. I think the software is this ideal early playground where there's going to be very little deviance involved in building new ways of learning. It's much more about pause for a moment. If you could refactor this profoundly, what would you do?
Right.
Profoundly, not just, work up a skill for yourself, self-serve, kind of haul yourself up by your bootstraps, but look at the collective. How would you just change the network graph of what gets done, who's handling what comms happen, all that, it's really hard to do because right now the performance pressure to get value out of AI is intense, and this stuff is rad. It's so fun.
Yeah.
And you're tired, and I don't know how much more productive I am, but oh my God, look at what blank can we lose track of the idea that sprinting more on the same treadmill that you were given in 2022 is probably not the sustainable play.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you make a really good point there, right? Is that if we operate under the hypothesis that, AI is reducing the cost to make a mistake in the realm of software development, I won't necessarily apply that to surgery or something possibly more with bigger consequences. But in the realm of software development, right, I still see a lot of engineering leaders, or whether that's in CTOs, CIOs, or whoever, it seems like they're still holding the cost of the mistake the same as pre-AI, right? And I understand before AI and when it took a large amount of capital and time to write code, you wanted to get the best people on there, so you're fighting for senior talent. Maybe investing in upskilling and reskilling made more sense because the cost to make a mistake of if you build all of this for 6 months and it's wrong, that's a big mistake. But now it's they need to. I feel like there's this argument to make that they need to kind of readjust their frame of focus. And while to your point, I completely agree, being more adamant about what you build is more important now than ever. But knowing that, hey, if you take a junior person and you want to put them on a hard problem with some guidance, obviously oversight, if they try it and it doesn't work, they maybe burned $5 or $10 worth of tokens. So what? They're learning as they go. And I think that's powerful. And I in my mind, it's a little hard to reconcile, because even as I on the Andela side look at some of how we're project planning for projects, it's still planned as pre-AI. And then when you get into build, it's hold on, this is different. We need to do something different here. And, so, but to that point, right, if you, when you're talking to CIOs or senior leadership, and, you're talking about this potentially systemic scale issue of skill loss between novices and experts, it's that, how should engineering leaders redesign work so that it keeps people learning while also getting them those productivity gains that they were all promised or sold?
Yeah. I'm going to say now, it turns out I have a third voice in my head, which is the cynic. So I'm going to give you that voice now, which is they shouldn't. Humans aren't qualified.
Fair.
And the reason, and I mean that kind of seriously. So look, you could take the first third of my book and be like, oh, right. In each of those 3 chapters, there's a 10-point checklist, a empirically observable set of behaviors or conditions to look for to identify whether skill development is going to be jointly enhanced with productivity, like we've been talking about, for challenge, for complexity and connection. You could take all of those, and in fact, I have done this and have turned it into a GitHub repo. You could take those and have it eat a bunch of digital exhaust from your work, Git stuff, down to comms between people, Slack, Jira, whatever, and assess the extent to which challenge, complexity, and connection are healthy in that process, right? Mm-hmm. That's the sort of move to make that you'd need to do this systematically, because right before, like what I just suggested is a step in the correct direction. I think you have to automate the assessment process, basically. Mm-hmm. If you don't do that, what you're liable to do is just pick a flavor of the month thing to focus on because you happen to know the person who does, like traditional sort of org change selection criteria, which are not bad per se. They're just out of sync with the pace of change now. You'd go pick a thing and go try to like, oh, cool, let's try to do the bomb disposal thing over here. Right? And let's just say you get a perfect win. You nail it. It takes 6 months and you come up with a great use case. And now 6 months later, how much more IQ is being shipped for what costs from the model providers, and your whole industry is now upended. Like it's just out of pace now. Right. It's like a hummingbird trying to talk to a redwood or something, So that's the trouble. The trouble is you have to find some way to automate your way of measuring your organization so that you can figure out systematically where is the rational place to direct my attention. Right. And so AI is the only way I know of doing that. But that doesn't, now that I've said that out loud, I'm confident that some of your enterprising, like hi folks, viewers or listeners are going to be like, hey, wait a hot minute. Mm-hmm. I have access to all those data streams. I'm going to go grab Beane's 10 criteria plus some traditional productivity metrics and just scrape all our internal data. And that's the kind of thing you have to do. And set up a cron job to run that whole thing constantly. Right. Yeah. Then you'd have a genuine daily momentary finger in the wind on where's the place that we could invest minimum calories to get max improvement. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is extremely, extremely good insight. And I like the idea of like looking at the digital exhaust, because I don't think, at least some of the people I've talked to don't necessarily think about all the exhaust that comes out of it, and being able to your point, like especially with the work that you're doing at SkillBench, right? Like be able to like passively and autonomously get that, because a lot of times it just seems like additional effort that companies don't want to do, because it's just pedal to the metal, go as fast as you can. Everything else doesn't matter, which, is partly, I think, like pushed by the media and rather than, what should be happening. But I know that we're like getting up on time here. So I've got one final question for you, kind of our outro question here, is that so in the book, you quote Richard McGill, who's a kinesiologist at NYU. And he had a really good quote, right, about, I think, looking at things. He said, don't ask, how the ball was released, but ask, like, where were you looking to see what type of pitch it was? And, that first question is really about looking at a specific part of the action, or the second is, where were you looking to see where the pitch, to see what type of pitch it was, is about looking at the situation. And I think that a lot of engineering leaders right now are trying to ask how the ball was released, and they're very focused in on what is this doing for the developer day to day. So, if you had to pose to them, like where should they be looking, right, to kind of see this larger thing going on?
Right. So the first and only move you'd really need to make is to find some data-driven way of getting at the question of the learning rate in your organization. Fine. SkillBench is a way to do that. Mm-hmm. This is the bet we're making. We've been working at this for like 3.5 years now. So this is one flavor of a solution, but some way of figuring out not just, are we getting a productivity boost for this individual, for this group, for the company, for this function? Important question, essential. question. The key question is, where and how is the rate of improvement going up, down, or flat? How would you know? Because that learning rate is more important by orders of magnitude than any gain plus or minus you're getting right now. If you're getting a negative now, you're actually decreasing quality and throughput, but the learning rate goes positive over time. That would accord with 80 years of research about successful organizations in technology, dealing with new technology. It's known as the productivity J curve in economics. You get a dip and then a huge boost. Firms that go for a boost right away shred themselves. They just can't learn fast enough. So that's a fractal thing. It's down to the individual. Is the individual atomic unit in the org put in a position where they by default are going to have to get better, smarter, faster, their career is enhanced, etc. And is the org doing the same? Those are really interdependent questions. So meter that along with productivity, that right there, and do it automatically. Don't stick your finger in the wind. Don't use surveys. None of this stuff that relies on vibes. Get objective data. Use AI to meter it. Do it in a way. We just have new options there. Cheap, credible, high speed. Get on it.
Win. Yeah. Well, man, I thank you so much for stopping by. This has been extremely good. And to anyone listening, I highly recommend the book. It is very, very good. I just got it on Monday, so I haven't quite made it to chapter 9 yet, but I've got a bunch of highlights and marks in there. So highly suggest
reading, by the way, kids, do it. Reading.
Read physical paper, like Kindles are great too, but man, something about cracking open a physical book is so good. But before we go, any cool upcoming projects, anything you want to plug, anything you want to give a shout out to?
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, I'll just take 20 seconds and just say, you folks, you can find this online. So the chief economist at Google gave a significant research grant to me and also some collaborators at SkillBench, a doctoral student of mine, to study all knowledge work and these traces of interaction between humans and models to get at some of the questions we're talking about. And Cory, this is part of how you and I got introduced. Like we have, it's turning out in an amazing way that Andela is going to be a part of that data collection process. And so we're about to get IRB approval for that. But to me, that's going to be this sort of exploded out from software to the entire world of knowledge work moment where we can see the relationship between these things. And so that is super academically thrilling. I think will be practically valuable to the world. It's a delight to have been working with you on that and the team over at Andela. And so that is going to be a head turner of a white paper. Yeah. And should really help us all figure out where the opportunities and risks are. And it'll be, I'm not aware of any other effort to try to do this. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. And we'll see you on the next one.
Cool. Cheers. Bye.
All right, everyone. That is it for Shift Tab for today. Thank you all for dropping in and listening and or watching. And thank you so much for Matt for stopping in to share a little bit of the wisdom. Until next time, I'm Cory, your host, and we'll see you on the next episode of Shift Tab.